Jeff Lard, and this is my story of God's grace. So I bonded with my father really well when I was a little boy. We liked the same things, we liked the same movies, the same TV shows. If there was anything crappy he had to do outside, like go to the dump or dig a ditch or cut wood, I was always there with him. I was always kind of his mini-me. And I always really felt accepted by him. I always felt like I was kind of part of the fraternity of manhood, you know. My mom, though, we didn't really have a good relationship. When I was really, really young, she had a lot of medical problems. And for whatever reason, I didn't bond with my mom. I remember growing up feeling a very deep desire to be affirmed and accepted by women. And I wasn't able to articulate it or anything. I just knew that I was kind of afraid of women, and at the same time, I wanted to be accepted by women. So this is, I grew up in the 80s and, obviously well before the internet. And what would happen was a lot of guys in my town, they would commute into the big city, and then after work, they would stop off at the gas station, get a can of beer and a pornographic magazine. They would head home, they'd pull off into the orchards and drink their beer and kind of flip through their porn mag, and then when they were done with their beer, they'd throw both the can and the magazine out the window, thinking that was kind of the end of it. But my friends and I, we ride around constantly on bikes. That we all go down by the railroad tracks and in the orchards and stuff. And we would find magazines all the time, like all the time. At least once a week we'd find a hardcore magazine. And, we started collecting them at a really young age. I think I saw my first pornographic magazine maybe 6 years old. I know I was around first grade. And I was drawn to it. I didn't know why, but you'd open up the magazine and just beautiful older women would be smiling at you and showing you the most intimate parts of her body. And weirdly in my brain, that felt like acceptance, it felt like safe acceptance, because I could turn the page. I knew she wouldn't reject me, and I was kind of just drawn to the pornography. And so me and my friends, we'd collect porn mags that we found on the side of the road in the bushes or in the orchards or whatever. And I'd say by 8th grade, I had a really substantial collection of pornographic magazines. And by 9th grade, it had moved past just fantasy, and I became determined to have sex with any girl that would have me. And I'd seen it so many times in magazines, I was going to get it done. So I made arrangements to meet with a girl at the high school after school to have sex. And we had our little rendezvous. And right about this time too, I was going to a health class at the high school, and they did a big section on STD and AIDS and stuff. And being the person I am, I started to get really anxious about it, and started to think like, wow, what if I got AIDS from this girl? And the more I started thinking about it, the more obsessed I became, and it began to be where I couldn't eat or sleep. I was so anxious about possibly having AIDS. Eventually, because they knew something was wrong and I was losing weight and everything, and I eventually confessed to my parents what had happened. And at the ripe age of 15 and a half, my mom drove me down to the health clinic, and I got my first STD AIDS test. The doctor, he did the test and said, you're gonna have to wait a week to get the results. And that was probably one of the longest weeks I'd ever had. Again, I couldn't even function. I was so overcome with anxiety. I believed in God. My parents told me, there is a God, the Bible's real. We didn't go to church, but I did believe in God. And so during this week, a sleepless night, in the middle of the night, I prayed my first prayer. And I remember exactly what I said. I said, God, I know you don't bargain, and I don't have anything to bargain with you. But if this test could come out clean, I promise that I'll do whatever I can to find out about you. And of course, the test came back negative. I didn't have anything. I wanted to be a man of my word, so I walked about a mile down the road to a church, and I went to church, and that Sunday I gave my life to Christ. And I was relieved. I felt great. I'd given my life to Jesus. I thought, I'm done with the old Jeff. I'm done with pornography. But it didn't work out that way. What had happened is I started to kind of live two lives, where I was living for Jesus and I was studying the Bible, and I was going to youth group. But then there's another part of me that kind of hung on to pornography and still kind of collected magazines every now and then. Eventually I ended up having an affair with a married woman at the church. It all blew up and I was shunned out of the church. A couple of years after that, I found myself in a brothel in Mexico and looking at possibly having another STD or AIDS. I came home, I told my parents what happened, and we went down. My dad took me down to the health clinic again to get my second STD AIDS test. And right before this, about a month before this, I met this awesome Christian girl at the Christmas party at work. And I mean, she was everything I'd hoped to find, and I finally found her, and I thought, man, God, I finally found the right one, and I just ruined myself. I ruined my life, and I'm gonna have to tell her I can't date her because I have AIDS, and I was overcome with grief again. So I prayed again, fervently, and miraculously everything came back negative. It was miraculous because the doctor was like, "Yeah, you got something in Mexico," but came back everything was negative. They tested me for like 75 things, and it all came back negative, and they were really shocked by it. So I met Melissa in 1994. We got married in 1995, and I thought, man, this is it for sure. I got a wife now, and I'm following Jesus, and not gonna have any more problems with pornography or thinking about sex because I'm married. It's gonna be awesome. It's gonna be just like on the movies. But it was super naive, I had all of my baggage, she had her baggage, and we quickly found out that two people weighted down with baggage, they get under the same roof. It's not like in the movies at all. So we had a lot of tension, we had a lot of frustration, a lot of yelling, a lot of fights. And it was 6 months into our marriage. I was working downtown, and we just had a real big fight. I was super frustrated and stressed out, and I looked up, and there was a really fit, really healthy looking prostitute, and I thought, man, maybe I should do this. I'm gonna cheat on Melissa, and so I decided to cheat on my wife, and I pulled over and started talking to her, and I found out right away the reason she looked so fit and healthy was she was undercover Fresno Police Department, and there was a big prostitution sting, and before I knew it, I was swarmed by police officers. I was thrown to the ground, and I was handcuffed, and they brought me off into this house that was nearby, and they brought me into the house, and there were cops everywhere, and there was also a big line of guys that had been busted for soliciting a prostitute right before me. So they put me in this line with these other guys, and I'm in shock, and I'm looking around, and I look up, and I see the local news is there, like 2 stations, and they've got cameras, and they're filming everybody, and they want to record the big prostitution sting. And he's a biker guy, and a gang member guy, and a truck driver guy, and a doe-eyed 20-year-old Christian boy that's crying, and a college professor. Who are they going to put on TV to get the most amount of people to watch? So of course this 21-year-old Christian boy ended up being the poster child for the prostitution sting, and my face was plastered over 2 counties probably. Everybody watched TV in those days, they didn't know. So I was brought downtown. I had to call my parents. My mom had to come down and bail me out, and then I drove home to tell my 19-year-old newlywed wife that her husband was busted in a prostitution sting, and my face is probably gonna be on TV. So that was probably the darkest moment in my life. And I'm not suicidal, but at that moment, that was probably the closest I came to suicide was that night. Her folks said, hey, just forget about it. Just come on home. You've only been married 6 months. Just come home. And I remember she said, no, I'm gonna stay with him. And she got off the phone and she got down on the floor with me and she said, I'm gonna stay with you, but you gotta figure this out, you know. I know you, I know the Christian man you wanna be, and I love you, but you got this other side that you gotta get to the bottom of this, so you gotta get counseling. So I'll stay with you, but you know, under the condition that you get real counseling. So we looked around and I found a Christian ministry called New Creation Ministry. And it was a ministry solely for people that had an addiction to pornography, men that had multiple affairs, women that had multiple affairs, Christians that were looking to get out of a homosexual lifestyle. And it was the whole gamut of Christians that struggled with some sort of emotional / sexual problem in their life. So I signed up to go, and I went every week for 3.5 years. And it was group counseling too, which really freaked me out, you know. So I was 21 years old, and I'm sitting next to men that had been married 40 years and had, you know, 9 affairs, and another guy that lived a homosexual lifestyle and was trying to get out of it, and housewives that had multiple affairs. And over time I realized that we were really pretty much the same person, and we had a very similar background, and it was kind of a same root, different fruit, you know. So our emotional problems would manifest in different ways, but we were really kind of the same person. And it was for the first time I really realized that all sinners are the same, you know, and all sinners kind of have something that they fall back on rather than God, some crutch that they run to rather than God. So I went there 3.5 years, and 6 months into it, Melissa, my wife, saw such a big difference that she's like, I gotta go to counseling, I wanna go. So she actually signed up for the same ministry, and she got into a group of wives that really struggle with codependency and people pleasing and stuff. So she went, I think, 3 years, and we really got really close friendships made with people of all different walks of life over this Christian ministry. So I'm here today to tell you that Christ heals. He heals physically, he can heal mentally, he can heal emotionally, he can heal instantly, but sometimes Christ heals using a long, slow, tedious process. And that's what he did for me. You know, he broke my mask. I stopped being a fake Christian. I started just being a real Christian. And he brought me through a long, slow, tedious process of healing pornography addiction. Next year, Melissa and I will be married 30 years. And by the grace of God, I've never cheated on her, not one time. He saved me, broke me, and brought me through his process of healing. So if you're wearing, then there's nothing wrong with me, I'm a perfect Christian mask, God can't heal you. He gave me time and time again an opportunity to lay down my mask, and I was too afraid to do it. But God, he's a loving Father, he is, and he'll break that mask. He'll break it, and it hurts bad. It hurts bad. I wish that I would have laid down my mask instead of having my Father break it to pieces, but I'm glad he did. But if you're out there and you're struggling, you're a man, you're a woman, you're struggling with pornography, you're struggling with homosexuality, put the mask down. Put the mask down before he breaks it out of your hands, because he'll do it. He loves you enough to do it. And it's better to lay it down and seek help, find somebody that is not wearing a mask and say, hey, how did you get rid of your mask? So I'm open to talk about that. There's absolutely, and believe me when I tell you this, There is nothing that you can tell me that would shock me. Nothing. You can tell me anything, and I will not be bothered with it. I won't be shocked by it. But put down your mask before your father breaks it, because he'll break it. He loves you. He actually knew I was going to get arrested before I even got married. And the day that I accepted Christ, he was already thinking about that day. You know, so the day I accepted Christ as my Savior, he already knew this day was coming in the horizon.
Wow.
And so when the day happened, I didn't shock nobody. I didn't shock him. Once I finally figured out that he was not disappointed in me, and I understood grace for the first time, I understood that all of my sins were nailed to the cross the day I accepted Jesus. Even when I'm 70 years old and I get upset with the dog or whatever the sin is way out in the future, he already saw that, and that's already accounted for. So that was really freeing for me, you know, and I could go before God again and I could say, man, I'm sorry, God, I'm so sorry. I knew that he wasn't shocked at my behavior. He was actually waiting for that day to lift me back up again.